As a child, I loved to tinker with things. I came from a pastor's family. We didn't have a lot of money. And so every time something would break, my parents knew I loved to tinker with things, and they would give it to me and say, fix this. And so I would fix toasters and coffee makers, and I was always fiddling. We had a workshop in our basement, and I thought for sure, man, I'm going to be an electrical engineer. My fifth grade science project was to make an electric windmill and to make a battery out of some zinc strips and some baking soda water, and show how you could power a house out of making a reserve battery. And that was back before that was ever even a thing. And so I just loved learning about electricity. I would go with a guy in our church on calls to go fix washers and dryers and some of those things. And I thought, man, I really enjoy this. But then I got into my upper level math classes in high school. Well, not even high school, in middle school, my algebra was really difficult. And my brain didn't comprehend it. And I really struggled with my upper level math classes. And at that point, my parents had the come to Jesus conversation with me saying, you can be anything, but if it has to do with extreme math, it probably is not a good choice for you. I got to go on an international youth convention. That was something that the Church of God would do every other year. And we went to San Antonio. It's where the convention was kind of held. We went across the border and did some work in Tijuana, Mexico. And as we came back in the convention, there was it was a thin place for me. It was that place where heaven meets earth. And I really, there was a spiritual connection, and it wasn't an audible voice, but very much an encouragement of my heart that said, I'm calling you to go into full-time ministry. And I can't describe it. I can't say this is exactly what the voice said, but it was definitely that urge in my spirit saying, I've got you set apart, and full-time ministry is where I'd like you to go. But my mom challenged me. She said, I want you to be sure that this is where God's called you to go. And if it is, I don't want to stand in between that, but I've got an assignment for you. I want you to go interview 5 senior pastors, and I want you to ask them if they could do anything differently, what would they do the next time around? I said, oh, this is a slam dunk. They're going to all say, go get your Christian ministry degree at Anderson University. That's what you should do. So I went to 5 of them. One of them was my current senior pastor, and then 4 others that were in the Michigan area. And I interviewed him. I said, so if you guys could do this all over again, and unfortunately they happened to be males at that point, but I said, if you could do it all over again, what would you do differently? And every single one of them said, go get your Christian ministry degree, that's great, but go get a business degree with it. And I said, why? Why would you want a business degree? If God's called you into ministry and called you to serve a congregation, it's about pastoring the flock and shepherding that flock, and it's about preaching well and teaching well. And they said, yeah, those are all great things. And yes, you have to be excellent at those things. But they said the hardest things that we learned in our ministry were the business decisions that we had to make. And there were times when we cut our teeth. There were decisions that we made that weren't always great, that even though we were part of ministry, we had to interact with the rest of the world. And they knew rules that we didn't understand. And if you can get that business degree, you're going to be well prepared to engage with the rest of society, which is what you have to do as a pastor. I ended up getting a business management major, a public relations minor while I was here. Loved every minute of it. So I went over to Eastside, which is where I was going and attending regularly. And I talked to Kerry Robinson and said, hey, I wanted to do an internship. He said, okay, well, is it with me? And I said, no, it's not with you. Don't take offense to that. It's actually with Bill Ashbrook, your business administrator. And so for an entire semester, I got to go through their board meetings. I got to look at their books and understand how they ran payroll. I got a great education and a real life experience around that, which again served me well. I did a stint for about 6 months in another internship when I was in seminary at Maple Grove Church of God. And as I pastored that church, I co-pastored it with Dr. Fred Shively. And as a part of that, I had an opportunity to use a lot of the skills, a lot of the information that I learned in my internship in that business class. So straight out of undergrad, I knew I needed the ministry training. So I went straight into seminary. My last year in seminary, again, I was a part-time pastor at Maple Grove Church of God. And at that point, they were looking for a senior pastor. So Dr. Shively and I had talked a lot about it, and we kind of came to the place. Their chair of their board was actually Dr. Ackerman. And we were all kind of talking about what that next step would be. And in the process, the church had offered me, they said, man, we would love to call you as our full-time senior pastor at that point. And I came home and told my wife, I was like, this is great. I've actually got an opportunity right out of seminary. And yet I really was plagued with that decision. When I was at Maple Grove, when I started, they didn't have a college ministry really going on. There were a few college students that would attend, and I really found that that was what my niche was. I loved working with college students. I loved the faith experience of the crucible of understanding of who am I apart from my parents' faith, how do I form that well, and that I just loved that experience. At that point, I had interviewed with 2 other universities and had gotten offers from both universities. And so my wife and I started to really pray and discern, okay, Lord, where are you going to call us to go? And we both clearly had said, you know, it's Arkansas. And prior to that, just before graduation happened and right before, as I went for the interview, my wife's parents live out that direction. And so it was kind of a natural opportunity for us to be close to a parent or a group of family members. It was such an opportunity of ministry for both of us that we both could be fulfilled in the things that we believe God had called us to. And we knew that we were in the midst of what He had asked us to do. They brought me in as a resident director part-time and director of student activities. And they never had a student activities program before. It was SGA did 4 events for the year, and that was their extended student activities. Well, I came from AU, like student activities and CAB was, I mean, it was an entity all in and of its own. And so I began to really build the program. I was asked at least 3 times, would you please consider moving over into student activities full time? We ended up making that transition. And then I did that for 2 years. And then the vice president comes back again and said, hey, our director of career development is leaving. Would you consider taking it? I actually told him no 3 specific times, saying I love activities. This is what I've been called to do. I love working with students. I'm not ready for that change. And he said, no, but I believe that you can help us build a program that can help us as a university get to a different place. And so finally, my wife and I talked and we prayed some more about it. And we said, all right, we really believe that this is the next move. So that's where I ended up with, and I was there for 7 years working as Director of Career Development and had a fairly robust program there as well. And all of a sudden, one day, Tamara Shelton gives me a call. She was the Director of Residence Life here at AU and said, hey, there's this opening at AU that's coming up. Our Dean of Students is stepping back and would love for you to think about coming and applying. And so my wife and I took some time to really pray. That was moving our entire family, including my daughter at that time, across the country again. And just saying, Lord, is this what you have for us? And there were multiple signs for us in that conversation that, yeah, this is where God's calling us to go. And so, yeah, we made a move several years ago to come to Anderson University and to become the Dean of Students and then the Assistant Provost and Dean of Students most recently. I would say that every one of my experiences was not wasted. So everything from painting a house to working in campus ministries, I was an RA for 3 years. Every experience I had in student life was building a building block. Each of those experiences had difficulties. They were not easy. They weren't, hey, here it is on a silver platter. And I think my construct of how God calls is, well, I mean, He opens the door and therefore you walk through and everything's going to be easy and wonderful and everybody's going to love you and it's going to be great. And yet each one of those experiences has had pain with it. It's had hardships. And yet God hasn't called me from those. And I've also experienced, as the transitions have happened, there's almost a holy discontentment that comes part of my spirit. And again, it's hard for me to put into words what that's like, but almost that, not that I'm unhappy, but just that the uncomfortableness that becomes part of my spirit, saying, all right, I'm prepping you for that next experience. And even as my vice president had asked a couple of different times for me to move, there very much was that holy discontentment that I had to struggle and wrestle with. And for me, that was that acknowledgement of, yep, you've done what I've called you to do in this space, and I've got another assignment for you.